Hey everyone, before I begin today's video, I just wanted to talk to you for a brief moment. Over the weekend, as I was putting the finishing touches on this video, I lost my cousin. He passed away due to a drug overdose. There's a lot of emotions going on in my family right now. Wondering if we could have done more, etc., things like that. And I just want to let anyone watching this video know that if they need someone to talk to, if you need someone to talk to, one of your family members, one of your friends, anyone needs anyone to talk to, my DMs are always open. I don't know why I could help. I don't know why you would want to choose me, but I'm willing to listen. The last thing I want anyone to do is go through the emotions that me and my family are going through right now. It happened so recently, I don't even know where to post professional help in the links below. But if you or someone you know is going through something and wants to talk, my DMs are open. I'm here. Thank you.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Who Wants to Brawl YouTube channel. That is not a question. That is a statement. My name is Who, and I'm letting you know I want to brawl. Here, we're all about the Magic format Brawl, specifically in regards to Magic Arena, so we don't have to worry about budget. We only have to worry about wildcards.
This episode is a new deck tech. On these episodes, I go over a new Brawl commander and walk you through my ideas and strategies of how best to build this commander. Today we're going to be doing a historical Brawl deck tech for Neyith of the Dire Hunt. It is 2 green for a 3/3 that says whenever a creature we control fights or becomes blocked, we may draw a card. And then at the beginning of combat on our turn, we can pay 2 and a red-green hybrid. If we do, double target creature's power until end of turn. That creature must be blocked this combat if able. So with this commander, all of our creature removal is going to want to be fight spells in order to draw a card, and we're going to want to have creatures that can build up their power and toughness on their own, or have creatures that just have high power and toughness without much help needed otherwise. At first playthrough, this deck way outperformed my expectations, so now I'm here to share the fun of fighting with you. And with that, let's begin. Our first strategy is going to be small creatures. These are going to be creatures that we play early but can win combat or fights later in the game, and therefore allow us to get the start that we need. Our first creature is going to be Elvish Reclaimer. It is a 1 mana 1/2 that gets +2/+2 as long as we have 3 or more land cards in our graveyard. It can also sack a land for 2 mana to search our library for land and put it onto the battlefield. This is a 1 mana creature that becomes a 3/4 as the game progresses, and therefore it can win combat later in the game, and that's what we need. And Careless Celebrant is a creature that if it loses combat later in the game, it can still take out the creature, more than likely, as long as it has 4 or less toughness. Or it can even take out 2 different creatures, depending on the creature we fight and the creature that it targets with its ability. Brushfire Elemental is a 2 mana 1/1 with haste that when a land enters the battlefield, it gets +2/+2, allowing us to fight smaller creatures earlier in the game and pull ahead of our opponents. And a Akoum Hellhound can do the same thing as a 1 mana 0/1. Kazandu Mammoth can also do the same thing, however it comes with the upside of being able to be a land in a pinch, and it is a 3 mana 3/3 instead of a 2 mana 1/1 or a 1 mana 0/1. So it is a little bit bigger to start. Our next strategy is going to be Ramp. As with any deck that requires a lot of mana because of bigger creatures or bigger spells, we need to ramp out in order to hit that stuff so we don't have those large creatures dead in our hand. So we're going to start with Incubation Druid, which is a 2 mana 0/2 that taps to add 1 mana of any color, and if it has a 1/1 counter on it, it adds 3 mana of the chosen color. It can also adapt for 5 mana meaning we put 3 1/1 counters on it, and it taps for 3 mana at that point. This is great in our deck because it becomes a larger creature later in the game, allowing us to do more damage in combat with Neyith's ability, or to win fights later in the game as well. And then Lotus Cobra is a 2 mana 2/1. It says whenever a land enters the battlefield, we add a mana. Pretty self-sufficient. Paradise Druid is as well. It's a 2 mana 2/1 that taps to add 1 mana of any color and has hexproof as long as it's untapped. Both Lotus Cobra and Paradise Druid can also become 4/1s that we can force our opponent to block later in the game, probably taking out a creature when we no longer need that mana. And then Wolf Wallow Haven is a 2 mana aura that enchants a land, and when that land is tapped for mana, it adds an additional green. Pretty self-explanatory, and overall great ramp spell. Cultivate is a Brawl staple as a 3 mana sorcery that gets a land from our library onto the battlefield and into our hand. And then Beanstalk Giant is a 7 mana creature that has power and toughness equal to the number of lands we control, but more importantly in this deck, for 3 mana, we can cast its Adventure Side, which searches up a basic land, puts it onto the battlefield untapped, and then we shuffle. It's always great to have our ramp attached to a huge body for later in the game that will pretty much win any fight that we put it in. And then Llanowar Elves is just a classic 1 mana 1/1 that taps for 1. Our next strategy is going to be large creatures. These are creatures that hopefully without any help will win any combat they get into, or win any fight we put them in. First up, we have Anax Hardened in the Forge, which is a 3 mana star 3. That's power is equal to our devotion to red. And then when a creature dies, we create a 1/1 satyr that can't block. But if the dying creature had power 4 or greater, which in this deck most of the time it should, we create 2 of those. This is great because it takes out our opponent's creature in a fight and then leaves behind a bunch of bodies for us. And speaking of leaving behind bodies, Rekindling Phoenix is a 4 mana 4/3 that when it dies leaves a creature that at our upkeep we sack and return the Rekindling Phoenix from our graveyard to play. So with this, we can not even have to worry if the Rekindling Phoenix is going to survive the fight that we put it in. We could just take out the creature that we need to take out. And then Migratory Greathorn is great because we can put it on one of the smaller creatures we talked about earlier, making it a little bit bigger and winning those fights. It's especially potent when you put it on a creature that gets +2/+2 with landfall. This becomes really big really quick and can get out of hand even faster. And then Questing Beast is just one of the most efficient creatures in all of Historic Brawl. As a 4 mana 4/4 with Vigilance, Death Touch, and Haste. Can't be blocked by small creatures. Combat damage can't be prevented. And then when it hits an opponent, it deals that much damage to a Planeswalker. Just overall perfect, especially in a fight. This can take out any creature, not just creatures with toughness 4 or less. And then World Shaper is a 4 mana 3/3 that when it attacks, we can mill 3 cards. And then when it dies, we can return all land cards from our graveyard to the battlefield. This card can represent some massive ramp, even if we only have like 3 land cards in our graveyard. This can take us over the top real quick. And then Ghalta, Primal Hunger, is a 12 mana 12/12 that costs X less to cast, where X is the total power of creatures I control, and it also has trample. In this deck, we're going to be pumping up our creature's power, making this even cheaper, and then this is a great finisher with Neyith's second ability, making it a 24/12 trample, and at which point our opponent pretty much can't do anything to survive. And then Ilharg is a 5 mana 6/6 trample that is hard to kill by when it dies, we can put it into our library. But when it attacks, we can put a creature from our hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking, and then return it to our hand at the beginning of the next end step. This is absolutely incredible in our deck, putting down a huge creature, at which point our opponents don't really have a good block, especially if we use Neyith's ability on Ilharg, making it a 12/6 that also brings a friend with it. Our opponent usually doesn't have much choice except to resign. And then Kogla is great because it enters the battlefield and fights a creature. With Neyith on the battlefield, that's an automatic 2-for-1. Actually, that's an automatic 3-for-1 because we have Kogla on the battlefield. If Kogla wins the fight, we take out the creature and we draw a card. It becomes pretty insurmountable for our opponent at that point. Same with Thorn Mammoth, except Thorn Mammoth, we can repeat that fight anytime any creature enters the battlefield under our control. If our opponent takes out Neyith early and then we play Thorn Mammoth after that, just playing Neyith again causes the Thorn Mammoth to fight something and we immediately draw a card and we are off to the races. And then we have Zilortha, Strength Incarnate, which has only ever been printed as Godzilla, King of the Monsters. It's a 5-mana 7/3 trample, but lethal damage dealt to creatures we control is determined by their power rather than their toughness. So when Neyith doubles a creature's power, it essentially gives our creature that much toughness as well, making that creature far more likely to win combat. This is a great inclusion in this deck. It's also the first deck tech I ever did on this channel, so if you want to check it out after this video, by all means go ahead. I'll leave a link in the show notes below. It's also my first video, so it's not as high quality as these newer ones. But now, with all these fight payoffs, we need to actually cause some fights. So let's look at the best fight cards in Historic Brawl, and let's get to fighting. First up, we have Primal Might, which for X and a green gives a creature at +X/+X, and then it fights a creature we don't control. This can be absolutely devastating, especially with enough mana open to pump, say, 3 into this, and still have enough mana to use Neyith's ability. That creature is going to get absolutely massive, take out a creature in the fight, and then most likely take out a creature in the block as well, drawing us 2 cards, taking out 2 of our opponent's creatures, and pretty much winning us the game. And Blizzard Brawl is great because it can pump up our creature +1/+0, and then it also fights, but if we have 3 or more snow permanents, which we try to have most of our lands be snow lands, it gives that creature indestructible, allowing it to win that fight and win the combat we force it to be blocked in. And then Arni Slays the Trolls is a great saga because as it enters the battlefield for 2 mana, it fights a creature, but then it ramps us on Chapter 2, and we can put 2 1/1 counters on a creature we control, allowing that creature to win even more fights later in the game. And then we gain life equal to the greatest power among creatures we control, a nice little upside with Neyith doubling our creature's powers. And then Go for Blood is just a 2-mana sorcery that a creature we control fights a creature we don't control. That's not very efficient with nothing else added to it. However, if we need to in a pinch, we can cycle it away for 1 mana. Warbriar Blessing is a 2-mana aura that gives a creature +0/+2 permanently, but when it enters the battlefield, it fights a creature we don't control. The +0/+2 allows us to make sure our creature doesn't lose the combat, most likely. Khalni Ambush is an inefficient 3-mana instant that allows a creature to fight our creature, but it can come in as a land if we need it to. Inscription of Abundance is a 2-mana instant that we can choose 1, but if we kick it for 3 mana, we could choose all 3 to put 2 1/1 counters on a creature we control. A creature we control can fight a creature, or we gain life equal to the greatest power among creatures we control. A pretty flexible card and pretty devastating when we can kick it. And then Domri, Anarch of Bolas, has a claim to be the best card in this deck, being a 3-mana, 3 loyalty planeswalker that gives creatures we control +1/+0 as a static ability. Then ticking it up 1, we can add a red or a green, and creature spells we control can't be countered. And then for -2, a creature we control fights a creature we don't control. So this pumps our board, it ramps us, and it allows us to fight something. And when we fight with Neyith, we draw a card. This card can get absolutely out of control really quickly, especially as long as Neyith sticks around. And then Struggle for Skemfar is a 4-mana sorcery. We could put a +1/+1 counter on a creature we control, and then that creature fights a creature we don't control. We can also foretell it for 2 mana and then cast it for 1 green. So that +1/+1 counter, don't underrate it. It can help us win a lot more combats than you think we can, and it's especially nice to just play Neyith on turn 5 and then have that 1 mana to help Neyith win a fight right then and there. Our final strategy is going to be utility pieces, which in this deck is pretty much just any leftover pieces in the deck. There's not too many. The deck runs pretty efficiently, based exclusively on synergies with Neyith. For fans of the channel, you had to see Wilt coming. You heard me talk about it all the time, and it doesn't stop here. For those new to the channel, I say that Wilt is a must include in any Brawl deck that has green in it. It's a 2-mana instant that destroys an artifact or enchantment, and for 2 mana we can cycle it away. And then Garruk's Uprising is a 3-mana enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, if we control a creature with power 4 or greater, we draw a card. Creatures we control have trample, and whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield, we draw a card. So this can be an absolute draw engine in this deck. However, the more important part for this deck might actually even be the trample, because this deck has no problem drawing cards with Neyith's ability, but it does have trouble getting through for that last bit of damage when we pump a huge creature that doesn't have trample. This card solves that issue. And then the Great Henge is a format staple. For 7 green, it's a legendary artifact, costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures we control. With Neyith's ability, hopefully that's a pretty high power creature, reducing this a lot and often. It taps to add green and we gain 2 life. Then when a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we put a 1/1 counter on it and draw a card. Again, that 1/1 counter on it can help us win a lot of fights and combats that we wouldn't normally. Otherwise, it's just efficient all around and just does so much for our deck. It's a format staple and an even better one in our deck where we're pumping creatures' powers. And then finally, we have to talk about the land for the deck. We have Fabled Passage as a fetch land, that the land becomes untapped if we control 4 or more lands. We have Stomping Grounds, which is a forest mountain that enters the battlefield tapped unless we pay 2 life as it enters the battlefield. And then we have Highland Forest, which enters the battlefield tapped, is a mountain and a forest. However, it's also snowland, which is important for this deck, as I will explain in a second when we talk about our 8 snow-covered mountains and 13 snow-covered forests. There's a lot more green in this deck than red, so we can get away with this imbalance. We want to run as many snowlands as possible, specifically for Blizzard Brawl, because we want Blizzard Brawl to be making our creatures indestructible. Otherwise, we would have a better land base than what we have, but we have enough ramp that adds 1 mana of any color that I think we can get away with this. And then finally, we're going to talk about some upgrades. As with any deck that we build on the first try, we probably get something wrong. I'm no different. And therefore, I'm going to take a look at what didn't work as well as I thought it would and put in some cards that probably work better. First, we're going to swap out Anax for Ronus the Indomitable. Anax didn't do his thing as well in this deck as I thought he would. The goal of this deck is to have our creatures survive, so its death trigger wasn't triggering. There's not that much red creatures in this deck, so its devotion for power didn't get that high. So we're just going to swap it out for a 3-mana 5/5 indestructible. It doesn't even need to attack or block for it to do its thing in this deck. We just need that big creature in order to win some fights. And then along the same lines, we're going to swap out Elvish Reclaimer for Wayward Swordtooth. I don't know what I was thinking with Elvish Reclaimer. This deck doesn't mill enough cards. It doesn't put enough land into our deck. It almost never gets pumped. Wayward Swordtooth along with Ronus are just going to be big creatures that sit there on the battlefield waiting to fight. It just seems like an obvious pick. And then we're going to swap out World Shaper and put in Cindervines. We need more artifact or enchantment removal, especially with Asika being the most popular commander we'd still see. And World Shaper doesn't do its thing that often. It doesn't do its thing enough to not have the artifact or enchantment removal. So that's my deck tech on Neyith of the Dire Hunt. What did you think? Do you want to give this deck a shot? If you do, what changes would you make? What cards do you think I miss? What cards do you think I put in that you probably wouldn't include? Let me know what you think in the comments below. After first playing this deck, I'm kind of amazed at how consistently it won, and how consistently I was able to draw cards and put so much pressure on my opponent that I was able to coast to an easy victory. And that does it for this video. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe, share with a friend to help the channel grow, hit that bell icon to make sure you get notifications about new videos to make sure you don't miss anything. I also want to give a shout out to my buddy Rob Slota for making the Who Wants to Brawl logo. He's a tattoo artist, and you can check out his Instagram by following the link in the show notes below. You can email me at whowantstobrawl@gmail.com. My Twitter is @brawlwho. I also stream on Magic Arena at twitch.tv/whowantstobrawl. Check me out on Sundays at 11 in the morning, where I stream last week or next week's deck tech. On Mondays, I stream random decks. Sometimes I do Brawl, sometimes I'll even throw in a draft. I also stream a random day of the week, or at least I try to. This is Random Games. Follow me on Twitter, and I'll let you know when I'm going to play ahead of time and what I'm going to play ahead of time. But for now, this is Who letting you know I no longer want to brawl. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.